Hello and welcome to Qtr Time podcast. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P. And we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
So massive thank you everyone for jumping on for this live Twitter space or live podcast. We absolutely love doing these, so it's really great to be able to do another one, and there is so much to talk about. It's unbelievable. Obviously we're going to be discussing the Australia-England Test Series and hopefully recap FAST5 World Series as well. We're currently recording live on Sunday 6th of November in the evening UK time for anyone who's listening to this back, and FAST5 has recently wrapped up. So before we kind of dive straight in, Luce, I'm going to throw to you first. What did you make of the latter part of this international window?
Well, I think as much as it pains me to say this as an England fan, it's been all about the Aussie dominance. I think they've been incredible. Getting their inaugural Fast Fives win was also great. 3-0 in the series over us. I don't think they could have asked for much better than that. From an England perspective, I think there's been a lot of questions asked and not many of them answered at the moment. Teams are obviously really starting to ramp up preparations now with the World Cup next year, and that's the kind of final end goal. And I think we can see how quite a few of the teams are starting to take shape, but I think there's a few pieces missing from England. And the final thing is probably just seeing those youngsters shining at the Fast Fives. I thought that was awesome, just seeing them take those opportunities on the big stage. It was really cool.
Yeah, man, and the dance moves as well. Like, that's what Fast Five's all about. It's brilliant.
Iconic. So good.
So iconic. So before we bring our lovely guests into the conversation with tons of questions, just a few housekeeping bits. As we mentioned, this space is being recorded for any netball fans who aren't able to listen live. And it will be released as a bonus episode shortly after. If you want to send in any questions or comments, we're going to be monitoring the hashtag AusVEng, so AUSVENG, so the same one that was used for the actual test series. Please do share your thoughts, questions, comments, musings, unpopular netball opinions. Send them all in. We absolutely love them, and we'll try and shout out as many of them as possible. Don't forget as well, the athletes that we're talking about are real people who have real feelings and are constantly in the spotlight, and they may listen to this live or on playback. So please be respectful with all of your comments and questions. Very happy for people to critique and to share criticisms, but let's be respectful at all times, which we always are anyway. You're a really good bunch. And so over to our guests. We're delighted to welcome former England Rose and current Scottish Thistles head coach Tamsin Greenway, alongside former Australian Diamonds head coach Lisa Alexander. Big welcome, guys. I hope you're prepared. We've got so many questions for you.
Hello. Yes, we're looking forward to it.
Right, so we're gonna jump
as prepared as possible.
Yeah, minimal time to prepare. Apologies for that. So we're going to dive straight in. Overall, I think there's a question that a lot of netball fans have around what this series achieved from an England perspective. Tamsin, I'll come to you first. What do you think England achieved? And do you think there was perhaps a lack of clarity around what the purpose of the series was as a whole?
I actually found it a really intriguing series. And actually from a spectator point of view, I think it's been strange to see just how many questions are being asked of this group now, and about decisions, and almost like you're talking about what are people expecting. I think the Commonwealth Games was a real eye-opener, because obviously we'd gone in there trying to win a gold medal. That didn't happen, and we finished fourth, which is probably the worst thing that can happen to any group that's trying to win it. And it's quite interesting to sort of see and hear all those questions now that are being asked of this group. Look, the reality is they lost the 3 test games. They were in all the games, and I think this is great in terms of what England are now able to do. They're able to stay in matches. They're able to fight back in matches. They've got the quality there and thereabouts. I think the problem is, off the back of the Commonwealth Games with not meddling, is that you took an ageing squad, and now people want to see lots of new young players in there, but you're running out of time before World Cup. So I think there was some questions around positional stuff that they needed to see. I think it gave some answers in that we've still perhaps not got the right people in all of the right positions. But I think there were some massive positives from the games as well, because obviously Fumi being out there was huge. And I think the stuff that was sort of talked about before the Commonwealth Games about why she didn't get picked were answered. You know, is she ready? Can she back up games? You know, do we need to protect her? Well, all those questions were kind of answered. She absolutely smashed it. So I think, yeah, there's going to be some questions around it from sort of fan base, but actually there were some major positives for England moving forward if they take the right steps now over the next few months.
Yeah, we've got lots of sort of thoughts on squad selection as a whole, which we'll come to in a bit. But Lisa, what's your thought on that? What do you think this series achieved for England? And do you think there was a lack of clarity around the purpose at all?
I don't think there was any lack of clarity around the purpose. The purpose is always, when you're going in a test series against, I guess, the world #1 gold medalists, it's going to be very, very tough. And you want to put your best lineup out there. You want to put your best 7. You want to really put that under pressure and get that practice that you need to go into a World Cup year. And largely, I agree with Tamsin. I think England definitely got that, and they were right in the game. Even, you know, that first test and the second and the third test, it could have been won. So there were many positives out of that, and I think obviously the players coming in, particularly to that Commonwealth Games group, Fran Williams and Fumi Fedoju, certainly showed that they're ready to take over that mantle in the defence end. And there was a lot of defensive turnovers. There's still a little bit of question marks around the wing attack position, and you know, I think that's an obvious weakness straight up for England at this stage. So it's something that they're going to have to look at, investigate, and perhaps the Quad Series will help them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a few questions around the sort of lack of exposure that we gave to some of the players who went over there, like particularly Alice Harvey, Liv Cheen. I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity in respect to those two. And the only youngster that we really blooded, I would say, is Fumi. So I think I had a few questions around like what the purpose was. Was it cementing combinations? Was it getting youngsters on court? And I don't think we quite did either, as far as in that sort of murky bit. But Australia really showed just how much strength and depth that they have. And coming into this series, they had beaten us 71 out of 79 times that these two nations have met. And I don't think, unless anyone netball historians can correct me, I don't think England have beaten Australia since Tracy Neville's time. It must have been pre-Quad Series, Luce. I'm not 100% sure. So if anyone does know, please do shout at us. But are they just unstoppable at the moment? How do you stop them? Bearing in mind that they were without 5 of their gold medal winning team from Com Games in Liz Watson, Gretel Boretta, Sunday Ariang, Ash Brazel and Steph Wood. Lisa, how do you stop Australia?
Oh, well, they are very difficult at the moment, but they are people and they're humans and they bleed blood and break bones, etc. But I'm not suggesting you need to do that to them, but they have
take them all out, Lisa. Is that yes?
No, but they clearly have some weaker areas, and I think you know, I think what's really impressed me about Australia is that their depth in their squad. They're very clear about how they're going to play, but it's the work they do off the ball that is just so sensational, and their teamwork and connections. And I think that's something that gets born out of hard work in camps, of course, but also confidence of winning titles, and they're feeling that confidence together, and they understand that they're going to achieve that by their teamwork and their unit work. There were patches of that from England, and I think it's a matter of really honing in on that hard work that needs to be done off the ball, preparing in attack, more preparation for what they're going to be coming up against, that quick preparation, and also in defence as well. Although I think, I liked the change up in defence where we had some variation to see out there. We were going from some one-on-one work, some wall on centre pass and back into some area defence as well. So I think, it's a work in progress. I know that's not going to satisfy all the fans out there, but, you're not that far off, and it just needs that teamwork honed in on.
Yeah, and I think for me, Australia also just seemed hungrier for the ball. Like what do they call them? Sue Gordon called them the bin chickens. That's the one. When the bin chickens are there, like they are on absolutely everything. And actually, in the last test, they had I think 13 pickups of loose balls compared to just 4 to England in that first half. They just got so much hustle and so much fight in them. But like you say, like we're not that far off, and we did actually win or draw 8 out of 12 quarters across the series. So Tamsin, with that stat in mind, 8 out of 12 quarters we won or drew. We lost 1 in test 1, 2 in test 2, and then 1 in test 3. How did we end up losing all 3 games?
It's always funny when we talk about stats, because I'm stat queen. I absolutely love it, but it doesn't matter if you win 3 quarters in every single game if you get absolutely spanked in the 4th one. So you can take that with a pinch of salt. I think the nature of the games for me were quite interesting. I think when you talk about Australia being hungry for the ball, it wasn't England's lack of trying. At times I think they looked tired and a bit stale in certain aspects. We were certainly hungry for the ball defensively. I think in attack we were lacking some spark. We almost played too safe at times, and I think that was quite interesting watching. But coming back to what you were saying about that, how do you beat Australia and all those changes Australia will be able to make? I think again we have to be quite realistic about how the Aussies are able to just keep this conveyor belt of talent going and just put players in. When you're playing out in Suncorp, it's a different level to our Super League. So those players that are playing week in, week out there, stepping onto the international stage is no different to stepping out every week against their opposition that they're playing. For the Super League, it just takes a little bit longer. So our options at this sort of test series was different to Australia's. They had to find an answer for Gretel Bueta, so they were able to bring in Wallum, they were able to bring in Garvin, they were able to put Conan on the bench, they were able to not take Steph Wood because they needed to find a shooter. But you're talking about these shooters that play against the best defenders in the world every week. I find it quite interesting that we all wanted to see Liv Sheen, because actually England's issue at the minute is fixing the attack, and they've got. I don't think we're in the luxury of the position to trying out 4 shooters right now. We need to decide if Ellie Cardwell is our starting shooter, and if she is, then we need to get the ball to her. And if the attack end can't do that at the moment, does she stay in at shooter, or do you bring in other players around? Do we really need to start throwing Liv Sheen out there as well and saying, oh, we'll have the 4th option too? Because I just don't think we're in that position yet. So it was quite, I think the words we've kind of thrown around from this series, they looked hungrier, they looked this. I just think England, for me, need to go away now and really decide what that attack end looks like. And I think Lisa talked about the wing attack option. We know we need to have another wing attack on the bench. I don't think that option is Sophie Drakeford-Lewis at the moment, unless she's going to play there all year. So they'll need to look at that. And we still need a centre. We tried 3 different centres, and I think that's what I was talking about moving forward. If we've learned that we've got a defence end that are operating really well, and we know those guys can step up, if we know that we want Ellie to be our starting shooter because we don't know where Joey's going to be at some point, then you've got to start fixing some of those issues around it. So I think we look at Australia and go, oh, they got to do this and they got to do that. Yeah, they got to do all that because they won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games and came off the back of a win at the Constellation Cup. And they're in a completely different place looking at options than we are right now. And I think we have to put that in perspective when we're talking about our side.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the sooner I think the Super League can professionalise and like really truly rival Suncourt Super Netball, the better. Don't forget as well, for everyone listening, like please do share your comments and questions for our guests on the hashtag AusVEng, AUSVENG. Lovely Lucy P is going to be monitoring that, so please do send them in. And I think there's a question as well, before we start looking at the specific tests, there's a question that we've got around selection. Now, obviously, we know that Jo Harton was selected, Beth Cobden was selected, and Beth was actually ruled out. I think it was after the first test that she wouldn't be able to play in the remaining 2, and Harton wasn't in the squad at all. There's lots of speculation around a knee injury that Harton's done, which I won't share because it's not, we've got no confirmation of it. But should either of them have been selected for the series if they weren't fully fit? What's the done thing usually, Tamsin?
So I think there's, again, two parts to this. I think we've all said it before. Netball can be more transparent across the board. So if you're going to take England injured players on tour, I've got absolutely no issue with it. I've been on plenty of tours where that's happened. But just talk about it. Talk about the reasons why. Be honest about their injuries. You don't need to share personal stuff. But, we seem to be the only sport in the world that doesn't like to talk about that stuff. That's the first part of this. Second part for me, the Beth Cobden thing, I think, was the right decision. If she's fit next summer, she's going to the World Cup. She's our best wing defence. So why would we not want to take her there? We've already got Jade, Imogen, Maux, all that have tried out wing defence. We know Fumi can go across there as well. So did we really need to take another centre wing defence in that mix? Absolutely not. And if Beth had been back fit, and I think that was the plan, if she'd been back fit, she'd have got on that court. So I don't think there's necessarily an issue taking injured players along if you're doing it for the right reasons. But I think the breakdown, again, in communication, and this is always the case, is transparency. Because if you're not going to be open and honest about it, and then you go and lose 3-0, people are going to ask questions. So I think that would be my only kind of point around it. But I think you have to remember there's stuff going on in squads that coaches are the only people that know. So, we can't always understand some of the decision making because we're just not savvy to all the information that's going on at the time. So I don't think it was a problem. I think because I think both of them are huge personalities and big leaders for that England group moving forward. But I think for me, it was more about the understanding of why it was happening.
Yeah, I mean, this clarity and transparency thing is something that comes up time and time again, and I don't know why it's so rife in netball. This, like you say, this lack of it. We just want to know what's happening and to be able to discuss it accordingly. Lisa, do you think that it was a bit of a wasted opportunity for Alice Harvey in particular? Like Tamsin, I 100% get your comment about Liv Cheen, and I'm totally on board with that. But I think for Alice Harvey in particular, it's quite clear that there's not a natural successor yet for Jiva Mentor, and that's why Fidoju's being put back into goalkeeper, which we'll touch on a bit later. But Alice, for me, probably is that successor, but she's not had an awful lot of opportunity to get onto court and be able to grow and be ready for the time of Netball World Cup or a similar big tournament. Lisa, do you think that she should have taken to court in this series?
No, not if Jiva was injured, and she clearly was not injured. And I think that defence end that was chosen was the best defence end that England could put out there at the time. So you've got to earn your place too in that group. And again, it goes back to the idea that we spoke about at the start. Was this series trialling players? No, it wasn't. It was about winning. It was about honing in on combinations that are going to go to World Cup next year. And it's not just, throw young people out against the world number one. It's a matter of giving them that opportunity when it presents itself and making sure it's a successful entry to them. I don't doubt that, Alice is going to get her opportunity as at some stage, and she obviously did against Uganda and did very well, but that's a different level to the Australian game. And, Jiva's got enormous experience, understanding, intellectual understanding of all the opposition she comes up against. So, again, it's adding to that squad and team mentality that England are trying to get together to put in their best performance next year. And so if the plan is to keep Jiva as part of that group, you don't just give Alice a go just for the sake of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's obviously so much that goes into these squad selections that we as fans are just completely oblivious to. So we're all like, why doesn't she take to court? Why isn't she on the bench? And actually there's so many layers to it, and it's so many nuances and stuff as well. It's really difficult and a headache that I would not want to have as a head coach. But I think if we start to move on to looking at each specific test, obviously test one was an absolute thriller with that goal, the buzzer beating goal from Donnell Wallum. They obviously won that match 55-54. And I think the kind of both attacking ends was something that stood out to me from this test. Wallum, as I just said, with that beautiful layup goal. And I think I've actually never seen a fan base be so united in a defeat in support of the team they've just lost to. Like the way that the netball family and the Roses fans came together to support Donnell Wallum and go, you know what, actually, if we're going to lose, like that's exactly how I want to lose, I think was really beautiful. And she showed such strength and resilience after the recent drama. Lisa, back to you, how important was that win for Donnell and for Netball Australia, given everything that's going on at the time?
Well, the amount of pressure in the background was just amazing. It was on front page news across all of Australia. We're just not used to having that sort of coverage in netball in Australia. It's usually, 3 pages into the back pages of the sport, and doesn't have quite the same amount of attention, So for everyone to be continually being asked about what is going on, why have all of these things happened? So all of that distraction that was going on, but at the same time, the team and the squad and the support staff remained very, very together. They were really clear about what they wanted to do and what they wanted to achieve. And I think, Donnell coming on and doing what she did was just one of the most amazing performances of any sport, any athlete in any sport. The pressure she had been under, and to be able to go out there and express herself the way that she did, and to win the game the way she did in those closing seconds was just amazing. It was just left me gobsmacked, I must admit. And it did bring, I think it actually brought a little bit of closure to what had been a really hard few weeks for the Australian team. And they just breathed that sigh of relief, because of course they respect England and want to play well against England. And I don't think they went into the Test match series thinking they were a lay-down misère to win the Test series either. Or, as we've already said, they had a number of their gold medalists out of that team and squad. So, for the performance that they put in to get across the line like they did was just, it was spine-tingling, and it brought the netball community together.
Yeah, it genuinely spine tingling absolutely was the word. Like I was almost in tears watching it. And Tamsin, obviously, as a former elite netballer yourself, how much does that off-court stuff and all the media and whatnot, how much does that play into your performance on court?
Yeah, look, I think that players now are playing in a different generation in terms of how active it is on social media, how much more coverage they're getting, and all the chat that goes around their performances and off the court as well. I mean, it would have been huge. I don't know Donnell personally. I saw her obviously playing in the Super League, but she clearly she's clearly got herself together, because I'm not sure there's many players that could have stood up to the amount of scrutiny she was going through at that point, and still come out and absolutely nail it like that. I think full credit as well has to go to Stacey Marinkovic and her changes. I've talked about that off the back of the Commonwealth Games, watching it in action, how brave she's been to make changes. And the same with that game. Like Donnell came on in that fourth, didn't she? She was absolutely incredible. And to go on under that amount of pressure and to stand up to it all, take that very first ball under the post, then finish with the layup, like that is just natural star talent. And I think we got a glimpse of it, didn't we, in the Super League when she was over. But I'm not going to say it's easy to ignore that stuff. I mean, even when we were playing in our day and we get the negative comments, it was tough. So to have all of that pressure on as well. But I think you've got to give credit to the Australian Diamonds culture. I think they've really pushed their sister in arms the last few years, and they've talked a lot more openly about that, and how much they back each other. And they're a credit to the sport at the moment, the way they all stand up, and even more so looking at this squad coming into this test. So many changes from the Commonwealth Games, and yet Cara Conan's she's sitting on the bench still cheering and supporting and smiling and being there with them. You've got full support from that group at the moment, that they'll fight for their place and they want to be on the court, but they also get the bigger picture. And I think it looks quite a special group to be involved in at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Lisa, we spoke to you about the Sisters in Arm culture on the episode that we did with you in season 1. I can't remember what episode it was now, Lisa. We have to look it up. So if anyone wants to listen to a bit more of that, and sort of what Lisa did within the Australian Diamonds, it's really, really good listen. Definitely go back and check it out. But if we look at some of the stats from this game, England actually had more defensive gains, 19-18, and we had more interceptions, 11-7. And I think we could have, I say quite easily, we definitely could have won the game, but we were just far too wasteful in attack. And there just seems to be this real hesitancy or unwillingness to feed Ellie Cardwell, even though she's got oodles and oodles of space behind her. What's Tamsin, I'll come to you first. What's the issue currently with this attacking end with England?
Well, there's a fine line, isn't there, between keeping ball and playing safe to it then sort of destroying the confidence of the game. Looking at it, it's quite interesting because I think we're all seeing all the space. It'd be quite intriguing to know what the players are thinking when they're out there. Look, when you're watching it, you can see stuff when you're on the game and you're in it, and it is not an easy ride against Australia. When you've got someone running on your shoulder, when you've got big arms over it, and it never looks particularly pretty. I think it was interesting watching the difference when Cardwell was on Bruce to Clow, because they both sit in different positions. And with Sarah Clow in particular, we were not happy going over the top. And I think if we rewind back to, was it the last quad series when Clow came on against Cardwell and just ate her alive in that first quarter? She turned about 5 balls over on her. So I don't know if there's stuff going on there. But I think at the minute, England are going through that transition where your confidence is going to be hit off the back of the Commies finishing 4th. It has to be. You went in there to win it, you didn't. And so there's that element at the moment of like, we don't want to lose games, we don't want to throw away ball, but actually it's kind of detrimental at the minute. I'd like to see a bit of a turning point, and this is what I'm saying. This series is not a waste if you learn from it and come in and do something different at the quad series. And at the quad series, they're going to have to let more ball go. You've got to see if you can get ball into Cardwell. And you saw that when New Zealand played Australia in the Consolation Cup, when they had Toiava on there just whacking ball into Weki. The difference when they didn't have that there. And Nat Metcalf played all season with Ellie at Thunder, letting ball go, and I'd just love to see that magic happen again. I think it's in there, but whether it's a bit of a confidence thing, whether they're trying to rein it into play safe at the moment, so then they'll build it back out, that might be the key as well. But I think we'd all like to see a bit of a braver attacking unit just have a crack.
Yeah, I think the Nat Metcalf thing is really interesting, because I would argue personally that in the most recent tests that we've seen from her, so this one and also Commonwealth Games, she's not been the same, I suppose, the same player that we've kind of come to expect. And it seems like oppositions have kind of worked her out now. And she's like really struggling to sort of offer something different or a slightly different challenge for oppositions. But we'll come to that a little bit later. We had a great question in from Jenny from Netball Scoop. Hi, Jenny, who said England had some challenges with first and second phase on their centre pass. So what key strategies can they use to address that? And Lisa, I know you've spoken with Scoop recently with an article they produced. I'm going to come to Tamsin again for this one and then back to you for the next one. So Tamsin, what key strategies can they use to address the challenges with first and second phase on their centre pass?
Well, there's a couple of things. You've got to work technically with your attackers to help them get over the line better, but that takes time, progress, whatever, working together. The challenges of Nat and Helen not having a huge amount of time on court together this season, and obviously building up into that. But then you've got to look at some other options. Like Ellie, we were obviously trying to keep her in the circle to be a bit more of a target shooter. So if you choose to keep your shooter in on a second phase centre pass, or trying to keep them in the circle a bit more, a bit like Janelle Fowler, to become, it changes everything. So you've got to use your back door more. You've got to.
Oh, I think we might have lost you, Tamsin. I'll tell you what, we'll come back to you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, hello.
Sorry.
No, you're all
sorry,
good.
that was people trying to get a hold of me. They've got to tactically decide whether, if they're going to keep Ellie Cardwell in the circle, which is absolutely fine, you've got to do some work with your backup players, and you've got to do some work with your goal attack, wing attack connection, which we know at Swiss has been lethal. But I think, and I know you said we're going to touch on that, I'm going to stick up for her a little bit here, because the one big thing that's changed for Nat is the centres around her that she's playing with. And that is massive. And that's no disrespect to our centres we've got in there. But when you take someone like Serena out the equation and you're trying to work now with England getting a starting centre in there, the workload on the wing attack at the moment is huge. You've also got the pressure of being a captain as well. I just think there's just so much, and everyone's kind of got isolated into that one position. There is an attacking issue, full stop, like with the four of them. And I think it's not just in isolation on the wing attack. I think we've got to find a centre. If Jade's not a 60-minute centre, you've got to see who the other impact player is, and you've got to look how you support that wing attack, because she can't do it on her own.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And to also stick up for Nat, I think particularly in Com Games, she played almost every single minute of every single match. And I don't think we utilised the other options that we had, i.e. like an SDL at Com Games, where we could have just given her a bit of a rest. And I think the pressure that's on her, and I think, like you say, for me, the issue is around more the mid-court as opposed to the attacking end. Although Helen Housby, I don't think has been firing. But similarly, could you attribute the issues that Helen's had this test series to the changes that we've got in that centre? I mean, Lisa, how do you kind of resolve that issue of having all of these different players, not knowing for certain like which one is the one that you need to kind of really back and go for and really invest in? And how difficult is that to have that sort of cohesion in the attacking unit when you do have so many centres sort of coming in and out and trialling things?
Well, it's not easy. And if the centre's a trailing centre, that is, they're just filling up into spaces rather than taking on the attack themselves, that's where the difficulty lies. So then you put pressure on always your wing attack being like first phase, but then first option on second phase as well. So you've really got to have some of those change ups in the variety of your centre passes so that you bring the centre into more of that attacking play. And it's a bit like having both of your shooters contributing to the shooting volume. It's a great thing to have both shooters being able to add to that, because then the defence, can't just pick on one of those players to shut them down and the other one's got to pull the load. So it's a matter of getting that balance right between centre and wing attack. Who's going to take on that drive to the circle? I think we're also forgetting how well Australia snuffed out England's second phase. And I agree that perhaps maybe the stubbornness around Cardwell staying in the circle and not coming out and using her beautiful movement that she does have might have created different options for Housby to play into that game as well. So it's a really difficult thing to get right within a game. So it needs that work on the training track to have a really good look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we mentioned this issue time and time again, but who is the next wing attack after Nat Metcalf? And actually also, is Nat Metcalf the best option for our wing attack at the moment? Should we be looking at Chelsea Pittman as well? But I think below that, like, what is the next layer that we need to look at? And I think looking at if we stick with our mid-court theme, we're going to move on to the second test, because this was a real standout area for me, is the mid-court, particularly Diamonds. I mean, the strength that they have in the mid-court in particular. I think Hadley, JLP, Parmenter, Proud. I mean, it's a shame that Proud wasn't able to complete the series of concussions. I hope she's all okay. But they were just outstanding. I mean, I don't know, Lisa, what were your thoughts on the mid-court for Australia?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. And, they didn't have Liz Watson in there, but it was great to see Paige Hadley taking control of that attack end in the wing attack primarily. But as we know, she can also play centre. But it's that craft of being able to continue those drives onto circle edge and get it into those shooters. The beautiful feeding skills that they all have. It was one of the things that Jamie Lee was perhaps criticised about, and maybe why she missed out on Commonwealth Games, was she's a little bit, gave away too much ball as an attacking player. But I think we saw her ability to read and have a long vision into the circle that she does have with the Giants. She brought a lot of that to this game, but also the discipline to get herself up onto circle edge and feed. And, you know, you've got that great connection between Maddie Proud and Paige Hadley as well from Swifts. So much work off the ball to create the moves that they go into and the spaces that they allow for each other to move into alongside their shooters. Just it's poetry in motion watching it. And I think Amy Parmenter didn't do her chances any. She certainly put her hand up for that World Cup team. Her ability to shut down Nat Metcalf on first phase and second phase and everything was outstanding. She was so sticky and she was clean and she came through for ball and she added to the attack down court as well. So, and that's perhaps another area that we need to look at with England is their transition out of defence, is that also assist or not supporting the attacking play of England as well? I think that's a critical thing for England to look at as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And don't forget as well, everyone listening, please do continue to send in your thoughts and comments, questions. Hashtag is AusVEng, so AUSVENG, and we'll be reading some out as we get further into the live pod. But I think sticking with this, mid-court theme, we had a lot of questions come in on our Instagram story around this. Abigail Reed Anderson asked, are we any closer to solving the future centre issue? Is Jade Clark the best option for World Cup 2023? She also asked, did we miss an opportunity to expose Ellie Ratu to Australia ahead of World Cup? We even had a question from Zoe saying, should Fumi be tried in centre? Which I personally don't think we should. We need her in defence, but worth asking, I guess. But do you think, and Tamsin, I'll come to you, are we any closer to solving our future centre issue?
Future centre issue. Look, we've got centres coming through. Ellie Ratu, I'd throw Amy Carter into that mix as well. I don't think we've found a 60-minute starting centre. And lots of teams go through this transition when you've got big names, big personalities, big stars that exit that position. So New Zealand went through it with Laura Langman. Nat Von B, when she stopped Australia, Kim Rav came in, and that was quite early because she got an injury. And I remember watching Kim Rav as sort of a 21-year-old going, oh no, she's not got it. And 3 years later I was eating my words quite happily because she went on to do a great job. But I think that's the reality. It's such a key position in any team. We don't have a 60-minute one yet. So Jade has got to be in there for me at the moment because she's still performing at the right level and she's still nailing it. But whether you'd keep her out there for 60 minutes throughout a whole World Cup against team after team after team, no, I don't think you have. So we've got a problem. That probably for me is where the biggest problem is now, because I don't think Max or Imogen are going to be your 60-minute centres either. It'd be interesting to see how Max goes this year in New Zealand and whether that does become her position and she can do that. But I think whoever goes next summer, there's going to be a little bit of a risk on this, because if you take an Ellie Ratu and an Amy Carter, you've got to accept that they are completely inexperienced going into a huge position, into a huge competition. And if you stick with what we've got, you've got to accept that you've got to now bring out the best of your wing attack and your goal attack, and you've got to feed Ellie, because otherwise we're going to lose that spark that we know Serena had.
Yeah, and like I knew obviously that when Serena retired it would leave a massive hole, but I don't think I actually personally appreciated just how massive of a hole her absence has caused for the Roses. Luce, is there anything on the hashtag on this?
Yeah, we've had Ali has sent in a comment hilariously in all caps, which made me laugh. Elle McDonald, she is the answer. So that's what Ali thinks. She did play well at Fast Fives, actually, to be fair, but not tested obviously so much at this level.
Yeah, and I think for me there's something that the lovely Erin Delahunty tweeted a couple of days ago, saying that there's this middle generation that's kind of missing from the Roses. It's that level between a Serena Kirsten and an Ellie Ratu. Tamsin, with the number of centres that we've tried, like we've seen a fair bit of Imogen Allison, Laura Malcolm, Jade Clark, we've got Ellie Batty coming through the ranks, who I think is like, almost up there. At what point prior to World Cup next year do we have to make some pretty cutthroat decisions and really sort of narrow down that selection?
I think England have to be brave next summer. I think they're going to have to make some tough choices. And what I mean by that is, Lisa was talking about Amy Parmenter there. Yeah, she's been absolutely brilliant across this series. But they won't take both her and Ash Braz to the World Cup next summer. So one of those players will not go. Just how Jamie Lee Price was out, and just like New Zealand left a load of people, and Australia constantly do it. I'm not sure we've been brave enough yet in some of our decision making. So, do we need Jade Clark, Laura Malcolm, and Imogen Allison all covering wing defence really as their first choice into centre? Or do you take one of them and then do you look at being able to provide another wing attack option properly and take another young centre alongside that, and then have someone like Beth Cobden in the squad? I just think we've just got to be, I just think we've got to be a bit braver. I just don't think that group necessarily gives us all the best options. And at some point we have to start making some key decisions around it. So it will be intriguing to see what happens into the quad series, because like I said, you've kind of come to a point now where you've almost got to go for broke, I would say, because, we're not only, we didn't win, and the other teams are also going to get better. They've also had more exposure. It's not like everyone stands still in time by the time the summer comes next year. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest area that I think we just need to be brave on and just make a decision.
Yeah, I would agree. And Lisa, obviously, Elle McDonald has been mentioned. Her name's been thrown in there. Do you think that we should look to invest some more time in her within the Roses setup?
Well, I think the biggest issue for the Roses is that position of centre wing attack, or wing attack centre, which Australia has two world-class, or three at least, if you're adding Maddie Proud into the mix. Centre wing attacks, Liz Watson, Paige Hadley, and also Maddie Proud. They're able to be on a conveyor belt because those players get that high-level competition week in, week out in the Super League, because it's one of the areas in the teams where we tend to not put in the import. So they're getting that practice week in, week out at that very, very high level. McDonald has certainly been in that training environment. She's come up through the Victorian system. So, her skills are very good in attacking play and feeding, and all the craft of being able to bring that ball into the shooters and make them look good, which is what I always say to my centres. That's your job. And I think she's got that spark and that athleticism as well to really go somewhere with the group. So I definitely would think that England would be interested in her. And, also Ali Ratu, has had a great series. Both of them did a pretty good job at FAST5 for England, and were able to control the centre. So you definitely have to have a look at the two of them.
It'll be really interesting to see how Elle McDonald goes at Rhinos this year. Sidebar, their squad is looking absolutely insane, so I'm sure she'll have lots of eyes on her this season. Sorry. I'm going to move us on to the third test. I'm just a little bit conscious of time. And for me, one of the standout talking points from this were both defensive ends. Maddie Turner, I think it was this game, Maddie Turner was on. She was absolutely sensational in the opening minutes of the game. But then also Fumi was just absolutely electric. Like I cannot rave on about this girl enough. But as brilliant as Fumi is, or was, in goalkeeper in this test series, it is arguably the weakest of her three positions. Tamsin, would you say that she's being put there? So I'm putting words in your mouth. I would probably say that she's being put there because we haven't produced a really clear, solid successor to mentor. Or is there another reason why you think that Jess is sort of opting for that goalkeeper position for her, given that she's only 5'8"?
It's funny though, isn't it? Because she's 5'8", and yet Australia made 26 errors in that last test.
It's crazy.
And 26 errors, but 16 of those Fumi had something to do with. So 10 were feeds into the circle that she got her hands on. 4 were shots under the post that Fumi got in their heads on. So, I mean, we say it's arguably her weakest position. Fumi's just a defensive queen. Like, I mean, she naturally sees ball and has the athleticism that I've not seen in a player. I don't think ever. The way she can come over the top of people and take ball off cleanly is insane. So, I mean, at the moment, England need another goalkeeper, right? So if she can play like that, why would you not? She kept us in that game in the third test. Can you imagine if that had just been a normal goalkeeper that had perhaps got half of those? Well, that's another 10 goals to Australia. So I think we have to be realistic about just how good she was. However, she is now out in the open. So everyone's got footage, everyone's got video, everyone's going to be watching. There is no doubt that Fumi will need to move out at some point across her career. But right now for England, if that helps us go and win ball, that's where we're at. It's literally where we're at. You know, sadly, Raz Quashie was one coming through. Hallie Adio was one coming through. Both of those have suffered injuries. And the issue when you have someone as good as Jiva for so long as Jiva's been in the game is that players come in and out and get missed. And you can't help that. Like, why for the last 10 years would you have not started Jiva Mentor? So that's just the way it's worked. But it comes back down to our pathways and our system, that it's going to take a few years for some of the others to get up to the level that you'd really want them to be, unless you get someone like Fumi, who is just a star. She's just one of those players that you can't create. She's just come about and it's absolutely incredible. So right now, I don't think it matters that she's going to be in that keeper position, because if you can turn over that much ball against the world champions, you know, even if you half that in most of the games, and she will always get ball. Every game I watched last year at Super League, I'm like, why are they throwing that? Oh, no, they just threw it again. And she will always get ball. So, yeah, long term, no. But short term, I don't think it's a problem for England right now.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. As you know, imagine it with any other standard goalkeeper, that would have been another 10 goals for Australia. Like, the talent that she's got is just next level. And obviously, Lisa, you've worked very closely with her as part of the London Pole setup. And I think Tamsin, it was you actually who said before that you would build your defensive unit around a Fumi Fodoju, because she is just that outstanding. But I think she's quite an unorthodox player. Like, the positioning that she has on the shooter body, the angles that she holds are quite unusual and really, really deceptive. So, Lisa, how difficult is it to build a defensive unit around such an unorthodox player like Fumi?
Oh, well, it's not really. It's a matter of everyone, you know, doing their roles in the defensive team. So, you know, particularly I know at Pulse we work very hard on those connections together and what we're trying to achieve on all of our plays on first phase, centre pass, second phase, and then into the circle. So it's a matter of her teammates understanding what her skill and talent is, and then, you know, we build traps around that for her to you know, do her thing. So, and she also has to participate in that. So it's her ability to improve her own game, her own one-on-one game, her footwork, you know, the way she positions herself. I mean, we had lots of discussions last season about that, you know, when she was up against players like Mary Chollock, who, you know, is such a fantastic shooter. Where was Fumi going to position herself? And you know, that will be a work in progress for her in any case. What I'd also like to see, and I know that Fumi will be continuing to work on this, is her drive and her attacking game as well. I think that's something that, you know, England, they're getting lots of really good turnovers, but we've got to have that connection in attack to get that ball out of there quickly and into that attack end before Australia gets a chance to set up their defence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of the things that this series highlighted, is that we were winning so much ball and then just wasting it in attack and just weren't able to get it to goal. Another sort of more general reflection on the series as a whole, I suppose, and there's been a conversation online with Caroline Barker and Pam Cookie about this, is this kind of mentality, shall we say, of Jess Thirlby and the Roses coaches about competing in games, as opposed to like outwardly stating, you know, we're here to win, like we want to win, etc. both in this test and previous tests, Jess has said that they're pleased to compete. And I personally don't feel like they've got the same kind of belief in their ability to actually win against an Australia like previous England teams have had. And there's been a lot of questions come in from fans about this, from Ashley J, Lottie O'Gorman, asking, do England still have that winning mindset now? Tamsin, what are your thoughts on this kind of we're here to compete attitude from a head coach?
I think you can take it with a pinch of salt when coaches come out and players come out and say stuff. Some will toe the media party line. Netball is still one of these sports where, actually, it's rapidly changing, where coaches and players are now doing the media thing, are not necessarily talking openly and honestly about stuff. There is no way that they're sitting behind closed doors going, "Oh, we're just here to compete, guys." Like they're out to win it. But there's also a protection mechanism. If they'd gone into the Commonwealth Games going, "We're definitely going to make the final and we're definitely going to win this competition, we're definitely going to do this," they have to live with that as well. So every coach and player will have a way of talking about their group and doing it. And England, I think we've all got quite a bit of short-term memories. Like, bar 2018, we've still not beaten one of the top teams in a final in a major competition. And as you read out that stat, which is quite depressing because I played in quite a lot of those games, losing to Australia on many occasions, we haven't created this legacy that we keep talking about, that we want to be world number one and beating all these teams. Now, that's not to say we haven't got the talent or the personnel to do it. And how you choose to present yourself is you. That's it. Like, I get into trouble a lot because I'm quite open and honest, but then I have to eat those words. So I went to World Cup qualifiers, wanted to beat Wales, we didn't beat them, so you have to come out and own that as well. So I think we can take it with a bit of pinch of salt. I don't think there's a lack of belief in that group, but I think we also have to be very realistic. We haven't consistently gone out and beaten these teams season after season after season. We've had some good wins in some good competitions and got the players up to a level where they're competing, which is brilliant. But there is still an element where we haven't worked out how to get over the final line time and time again. And I think that's the bigger picture for me. As a whole, how are we all putting into this as coaches and as in the Super League? How are we helping this group mentally shift and making sure that the players do believe? Because trust me, pretty much up to the back end of my career, we weren't thinking we were going to go out there and win every time, even though we really, really wanted to. So I just think we have to be a little bit mindful of that what do we want from this group? We honestly want them to come out and say we're going to go out and win, because they've got to manage that when they don't as well. So I think there's definitely got to be a shift across the board, but I'm not sure we can hold them totally accountable for towing the party media line.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because it's like you say, it's such a fine balance to have. And I think there's the danger that almost like if your players are seeing the head coach do an interview saying, we're here to compete, we're happy to just be in the game, then actually would that damage their confidence, or would it have impact on them psychologically? But then on the other hand, like you say, like there's that element of protectionism and wanting to sort of safeguard yourself so you don't get torn down. But I think at the moment for me, there's that disconnect between like which one of those kind of is it, and then how do the Roses take England fans on the journey with them better? And this was actually a question that we asked in the last live pod, but Tamsin, I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts on this in particular. How do England take their fans on the journey with them better? Because there's been a lot of discourse and I would say negativity around England performances in sort of recent weeks and months.
Yeah, I think the fan base are incredible now, and I have massive envy for the group that are playing now for when we were playing. There's so much speculation, there's so much more chat. There's so much more chat about actually the technical side of the game, which is brilliant. But with that comes cons as well, because when you lose, you're going to get torn a strip and everything else. Honestly, and I've said this all the way along, I do think we need to be more transparent across the board. And that isn't the ins and outs of everything. People don't need to know that stuff, and they shouldn't. That doesn't happen in professional sport. But I do think we can be We can be far more reflective when we win and lose. We can be far more open about squad selections and injuries and ways we want to play. And we can be far more definite across the board, inclusive of all our teams that are playing in Super League, of the style we want to play and the way England want to present itself. And I think that's something that New Zealand have got. I think Australia, having watched them again now, have definitely got it. I'm not sure we have it, and that is something that all of us need to, coaches and people involved in the game that are leading that, need to start thinking about. And whether it's because we've got loads of teams in the Super League and everybody's kind of off doing their own thing, I'd say it's fair to say we've kind of lost that element for me. So definitely that transparency, and definitely how the people working in the game can be far more integral and working together. You know, what is our sisters in arms? You know, what is our culture that Nolene has created? Like, I'd love to know that. And I think that's probably where our biggest downfall is at the moment. And I think it could make a massive difference.
Yeah, and I want to talk on this transparency thing a little bit more, but I'm just very conscious Lisa needs to go at 7, so I'm just going to bring you back in, Lisa. One of the observations that a lot of fans have made from this test series and also from Com Games is the different coaching styles, and there's been lots of compliments given to Stacey Marinkovic around the choice of her changes and the timing of those changes particularly. And I think it's fair to say that both Jess and Stacey have very different coaching styles. How would you define them both as coaches?
It's a very interesting question. I don't think they're necessarily that different in terms of their style. I think they're obviously, have both grown up as players in an elite level and then translated to coaching through being elite level players as well. So they learnt their craft from a younger age. They've just got they are both built in a different system, and the Australian system is extremely rigorous in terms of how the coaches are judged, how they're assessed, how they continue to keep working on their craft. And Stacey's only just come through a pretty heated year before this year, and all of a sudden here she is. She's come out and she has really completely taken the netball coaching world by storm with all the changes she's made, which have been brilliant. They've been proactive. They haven't been too slow. She's used her bench extremely well. But the other advantage she has is she has great talent available to her, but she's also got her moves and the way that Australia has played extremely accurate, and they've been able to, I guess, get that style of play of how she wants to play from a mechanics point of view, but also the cultural side. She's married all of that together extremely well, and that's been hard work and hard yakka in the background. And I think Jess has been pretty similar in what she's tried to do. But I think you're right, Tamsin. I think perhaps a little bit more communication around exactly the sort of way that England want to play, a bit more around the mindset, a bit more around the environment. This is what we want to do. We do want to go out and win every game, or we want to, really push the opposition to the nth degree. So a little bit more inclusion of all of us into that story about what England are trying to achieve, I think would really help. And of course, coaches review and reflect on every move they make and every selection they make. And it's tough out there. I think in the main, Jess has probably been a little bit conservative with her changes. She may not have made her changes quickly enough in when they've needed to be done. But in this series, it seems that she's actually, I think, tweaked those a little bit better. I think she's made some changes at the right time. So they're the sorts of things that she needs to work on as a coach as well. And that's that working on our coaching practice from a match day point of view, but also how we do it in our training sessions. All encompasses whether we're going to be successful as coaches or not. So there's more similarities between them than not.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your insight. I'm conscious you need to go, so please feel free to drop out at any point while we carry on picking Tamsin's brain. But thank you so much for joining, Lisa.
Thank you, and enjoy Tamsin's wonderful musings on England and
We
Australia.
will. Awesome. Cheers, Lise. So Tamsin, to pick up that transparency question again, because there's so much chat about this. In a lot of the sort of pre and post match interviews that Jess has done, she talks a lot about player errors and individual player errors, which I think is to an extent an absolute fair point, and is something that needs to be addressed. But there's quite often very little reference to or much reflection on the coaching side of things and coaching decisions. And one thing we noticed from the Netball World Cup qualifiers, after that, Elaine Rice, the head coach of Warriors, Northern Ireland, she was really frank and upfront in saying that, yep, they put their hands up, they underperformed. They'll be reflecting not only on what happened on court, but all of the off court stuff. They'll be looking at structures, they'll be looking at X, Y, and Z, absolutely everything, and reference coaching as a part of that. And now I'm not saying, let me preface this, I'm not saying that Jess shouldn't be the head coach or whatever. I just want to put that out there, but I do think that it needs to be a greater level of external reflection or what's being communicated to fans around the coaching choices, as well as what the players are doing on court. Would you agree, Tamsin, that we need greater transparency and sort of upfrontness on this, or do you think she's right to kind of keep her cards closer to her chest in that respect?
Well, I mean, you don't want to go out and give everybody your tactics.
Yeah.
And it also depends on the questions you get asked after the game as well. That makes a huge part on what tact you go down, and it also is a personal reflection on how you're feeling. Like, coaches are human, so you just lost 3-0. The last thing you want to do is go and do an interview and put a smile on and say, yeah, everything's fine, because it's not. Basically, it never is. I think again, it all comes down to personal choice for how you want to do things. Like the team responsibility part is totally how you manage your culture. If your team trusts you, and that's how you're constantly talking in and around the group, I don't think it's a problem calling out certain things or stuff that the team needs to work on. Whether you choose to go down the tact of taking all the responsibility yourself is again totally your personality, and whether it was, for all when you're coaching a game, you could be giving all the players all the information in the world and they just don't do what they do. It's a really tough one. Again, I think one of the biggest things for me is what Lisa was touching on, is that you're constantly learning as a coach. Don't ever expect any coach to be perfect or to be getting it right all the time. The reality is you have to learn. So I'll speak from my experience. One of the things I used to do a lot through Super League is keep the same seven on. I would rather coach them through the situation than make impact changes. And that was to do with me, not the lack of trust of the players. That was to do with how I used to feel as a player, and again, being brave enough to make those decisions. That's something I've had to work really hard on, and actually having someone like Sarah Frances Bayman alongside me, she's great at that. She's like, no, make the call, it's good. And so you have to find your partners around. However, the minute you're under pressure, it all becomes a different ball game. A different ball game on how the things you say, and whether you become defensive or whether you're open about it. So I think there's lots of holes being picked at the moment, and that's kind of going to be a natural thing because we didn't do well at Commonwealth Games and we've now just lost 3-0 again. So I think there's always going to be that defence mechanism come out first from anybody involved in that group at the moment, because they'll want to protect their own environment. Yeah, so I wouldn't always read too much into what is said after a game.
Yeah, that's an absolutely fair one. And I think we have to also be a little bit kind to Jess in that she has all of the scrutiny and all of the sort of comments and questions coming at her, but she doesn't have the big pay that a lot of other sports like football have, where she's not absolutely raking it in, and we don't have the money that a football or even a rugby or something has. So she's having to cop a lot of criticism and a lot of questions with not an awful lot back. But then again, that is the role of a head coach. Like, you are there to be scrutinised and to have your decisions judged as well. But I think something that we see quite often in a lot of other sports, when you have a head coach who, isn't able to deliver results, and like you say, fourth at Com Games is the worst position probably that we could have come in, and we've now lost 3-0. At what point do questions need to be asked around the direction that we need to go in for England? Do we allow, how long really is the sort of standard period of time to allow a head coach to really embed themselves within a programme and a high performance environment before we start looking at alternative coaching options?
I think you need to be given a cycle to work things through. It's not as easy. When you're with the Super League team, you're with players 3 to 4, 5 times a week. You can embed your culture, your way forward. I'm not making excuses. Look, you get into this job, you think it's the dream job. It's really not. You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I actually watched a lot of those coaches at the Commonwealth Games that were coaching the top 4. And it is a tough gig to be in. This is not an easy ride. You imagine the pressure that faced Marinkovic after they lost to Jamaica, and then they had to come out in a semi to England and put on that performance. I mean, it's huge. But at the same time, you know what you're getting yourself into. I think the reality is that coaches need a cycle to work what they need to improve on, to change, to embed their culture, to put all those kind of imprints onto your players and the style that you want to play. I think what's been interesting at this point is that if that had worked, if they'd have taken that group to the Commonwealth Games and we'd medalled, this would all be a very different story. We didn't get smashed by Australia. We were in those games. I know that's not the word that everybody wants to hear, but we were in them. We were competing, we were in them, and there were moments we could have turned over. We've also discovered some new options, and I think this group, they are learning. Bringing Fumi into that Australian test was huge, and look what she went and achieved. Having the guts to bring in some of those youngsters in the Uganda series, and that was also brave, because Uganda are not an easy bunch of players to play against, and we went and won that. So there are lessons being learned, and I think that process needs to be trusted as well. You've got so little time up to the World Cup now, and then moving forward, you've got to decide what the future looks like, whether the stuff behind the scenes is going in the right direction that you want, and whether the right players have been brought through, and that you've got another group to take forward. But I think you've got to give a coach time, and I'm saying that as the Scotland coach. Imagine if I was just given opportunity on sort of 2 years on what you can achieve. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we've chatted about so many different talking points now from this series in quite some depth. So if you had to consider in the whole series as a whole, who would be your player of the series from each side, to put you on the spot?
That's so tough. You know what? from us, I think we have to say Fumi was outstanding. Yeah. She delivered in every aspect that we thought she would, and she's now shown she can match it. So she'd definitely be my pick from there. I think Fran Williams would be a close contender as well. And I think there was lots of worry about this defence end, wasn't there? Well, we don't need to worry, and we've got other players coming through as well, like watching Jada at FAST5. With Zara and Tash Pavlin, like we've got players, so that's good. I think for Australia, you know who really impressed me, and I love her, Courtney Bruce. She's not always the star. She gets a real hard time. I don't know why. She's a winner, and when that team needed her in that second half of that last test, she just stepped up and delivered. And she constantly wins ball for a team. She constantly keeps her team in the game. She constantly does it with her smile, however anybody wants to take that smile on board. But I love that, because she is just in it to compete. And she did so much for that group across those 3 games. And, she probably needs a break at some point.
Yeah.
Yet she delivered again. So she would be, I think Australia's tried so many different people. And of course, there were sort of standout moments with Danelle and Amy Parmenter and all that kind of stuff. But across the series again, she's the one for me.
And Luce, actually, I'm going to throw you under the bus now and ask you to pick your player of the series as well. Completely unprepared. I'm so sorry. Who would you go for?
Okay, well, but I mean, it goes without saying, obviously, Fumi. I just looking at some of her stats on here now. So 20 gains across the series, 9 intercepts, 32 deflections, 4 rebounds, and she only played 120 minutes out of a possible 180. So that is redonkulous, quite frankly. But then I guess thinking about Australia, I would. It's a shame that Maddie Proud couldn't play the last test because I thought she was outstanding when she came on. I think they've got such strength and depth everywhere. But I'm actually going to go Kira Austin purely for how she played in that second test. She just had nerves of steel. She's come back so well from that ACL. And I think she's someone who I hadn't really thought of. I mean, I knew she was good, but then after this, I've now really started to think, oh, holy hell, she's really good as well. So that's why I'm going to go Kira Austin.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with Fumi. I don't think you can look past her, but I think I would probably actually go for Jo Weston for Australia. I think she's a bit of an unsung hero, often slips under the radar. And I think you get the likes of, a Bruce or a Clow who kind of get loads of the accolades, and Jo Weston kind of just goes about her business and maybe doesn't sort of get the praise that she deserves, I think.
But how interesting is it, Luce, though, that we've all picked 3 different people, and I'm sure people listening that they would all have a different person as well. That's how good Australia are at the moment, is you can't discount anyone. They're all just insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have asked Lisa before she went. Damn it. I probably would have had 4 different ones then. So before we chat a little bit about FAST5, we wanted to ask our 2 lovely speakers what their starting 7s and their bench players would be for England for the Netball World Cup 2023. We didn't quite get starting 7 from either of you. Tamsin, horribly indecisive, I'm afraid. And Lisa gave us her 12, but not in starting 7 order. But I'm just going to read out what you guys shared with us. So, Tamsin, your absolute dead sets, the ones that they were in your squad regardless, were Eleanor Cardwell, Helen Housby, Nat Metcalf, Fumi Fidoju, Layla Gusketh, and Fran Williams. Interestingly, no Jiva in there, no Jade Clark. There were the omissions for me. And Lisa's squad of 12 was Nat Metcalf, Jo Harton, which I thought was very interesting, Helen Housby, Ellie Cardwell, Laura Malcolm, Chelsea Pittman, Jade Clark, Beth Cobden, Fumi Fidoju, Layla Gusketh, Fran Williams, and Jiva Mentor. Tamsin, actually, Liz, shall I read our ones out as well? Because we were very similar, weren't we? So we both had, and actually we did ours in starting 7 order. So I had Ellie Cardwell, Helen Housby, Chelsea Pittman, I put as my starting wing A, Jade Clark, Imogen Allison, Fumi Fidoju, and then Layla Gusketh back in goalkeeper. But after what Tamsin said about having Fumi in goalkeeper, I might actually just switch those and put Layla back into goal defence. And then on my bench, I had Fran Williams, Ellie Ratu, George Fisher, Nat Metcalf, and then probably Jiva Mentor, but honourable mention to Zara Everett. And then Luce, you had your starting 7, Ellie Cardwell, Helen Housby, Nat Metcalf, Jade Clark, Imogen Allison, Fumi Fidoju, and Layla Gusketh. So we were almost identical there, bar the wing attack. And then your bench, George Fisher, SDL, Ellie Ratu, Fran Williams, and Jiva Mentor. So you had SDL in your squad, whereas I didn't. Tamsin, talk to us a little bit about the players that you selected for your England World Cup squad. Why are those guys the dead certs?
Because you need some people to go. Why are they the dead certs? Because at the moment, Ellie is absolutely killing it. She's only going to get better being overseas. Helen and Nat, you can't look past them in the attack end. And Fumi, Layla and Fran are your defensive unit that have stepped up. I think Layla had a quite quiet series with the opportunity she got, but I can't believe that she won't absolutely step up this season again. In a new club across the season. So there were 6 dead certs. It's not that I just think there's too many questions still yet to be answered, and I think we need to play the season out. I don't believe, I wouldn't start talking about the youngsters until you've seen them play a season. And actually, I was fairly vocal about my commie squads last year. One of the things I talked about, and I know it was really controversial, the whole Ellie Cardwell thing or Jo Harton thing. And actually on the grand final, I said Ellie for me had done enough. She should be in that squad. She was absolutely outstanding. But then I wouldn't have ever taken both of them, because I do think you need to be able to change up a side. And I think if Australia showed us one thing at the Commonwealth Games, and what they've just shown us again here, and what New Zealand are trying to do at the moment, is that you don't have a 7 anymore. And when you need to change things, it can't be a lot. For me personally, now the game has changed enough that it can't be like for like. So what Stacey did in that final against Jamaica, she was able to completely change her circle. She was able to bring Cara Conan on and Greta Bueta out, and it completely messed up Jamaica, who were prepared for Bueta at the back and Steph Wood out. And I just think for England at the moment, there's too many similar changes. So the Imogen, Laura, Jadie thing for me, all outstanding wing defences. But why do you need all three? Like, I just don't understand that. So I think, and it's brutal because they're actually all good enough to go. But if we're getting to this point where we're making really tough decisions like that, it's also showing that our pathway and our system is working, and that we should be picking from more than just 12 to 14 athletes. So, I'm not saying that Jiva shouldn't be in that group, but we need to look at how she performs this season, because if Fumi's suddenly become your starting goalkeeper, then you need to know who your backup is. Now, is it Jiva because she's so experienced and she's going to have a good season this season, or does someone else step up? And I think that's where I'm at with the midcourt as well. Like, if you don't need all three of them, then you've got to see who performs best this whole year. And then why taking them? Who plays best with who? What style of play are they giving you? Is it a trailing centre? Is it more an attacking centre? Do you need a defensive centre? All those questions come into play. And I just think we've been too safe for too long on some decisions. And it's not necessarily, don't just pick 3 centre wing defences because they're all really good. Pick the best one and then pick someone else in another position. And that's kind of where I feel England need to go if they want to find some spark against an Australia and a New Zealand and a Jamaica side who are only going to get better this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it is completely brutal. And like we referenced earlier as well, think of Australia, the people who potentially won't make the World Cup squad. Are you really going to take Ash Brazel and Amy Parmenter? Probably not. So to have someone of that quality not go into Games is to World Cup, is devastating. So the fact that we're able to have the same kind of quality sat at home and not coming with us is testament to the strength that we are building and we do have. But we actually thought it'd be really fun for everyone listening. We've created a little graphic for you guys to put on your Instagram stories for you to share your World Cup squad with us. So we're going to tweet that any second now. Or we're going to tweet it afterwards, potentially. And you guys can have fun sharing it, your starting 7s and your squad for England for the World Cup next year. And do tag us, we'll pop it on our stories and share it for you. So yeah, keep an eye out for that graphic coming soon. We're going to chat a little bit, just for sort of 10-12 minutes, about Fast 5. Probably not going to be able to chat for too long because I'm conscious of time, and obviously Tamsin, you've given up a lot of your time this evening for us, so we're very, very grateful. But it was a wonderful series, so entertaining. There's still several bits that I need to catch up on afterwards, but is the first ever Fast 5 title for Australia. So anyone who hasn't caught up and you don't want to spoil the results, close your ears now. But the overall rankings were Australia first, South Africa came in second, which you love to see, New Zealand in third, England in fourth, Uganda fifth, and Jamaica sixth. So many talking points from this and so many standout players. Luce, I'll hand over to you. Who were some of the standout players for this for World Fast 5?
I mean, it was amazing across the board. I think that all the New Zealand fans were clearly so behind Uganda as well. Yeah. And Trollope was fantastic. I think she was fans player as well. And South Africa, some really, really nice shooting from them. I thought it was interesting that Australia brought over 2 of their players, obviously in Sophie Dwyer and Sophie Garbin, Sophie Squared, as they called them, which I thought was maybe a bit plagiarism, but it's fine. They were really good, and it was interesting, and I wondered whether that was something England might have been able to consider, perhaps if we knew that Alice Harvey and Liv Cheen weren't going to be getting that much court time in the Australia series, whether they could have come across. But anyway, that's sort of by the by. The Aussie defence were absolutely monstrous. Top two for the most gains were Hinchliffe and Jenner, and Australia the most gains overall. But interestingly, Uganda second for gains with 47. So they did a lot of work, and they were just so fearless as well. I think, first time in the competition, it was fantastic to watch. Tamsin, any thoughts from you on the competition overall? Any key players?
I love FAST5. I really do. I do take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, though, in terms of clearly the standouts, but it is quite a different game. There's so much space in that game. It's quite an interesting one tactically to watch and do. But I think when you're looking at England, I was talking about the defence earlier. I was really impressed with Jada Pachova. I thought she was great in the back. Paige Reed really stood up and delivered down the attack end as well. So it was just a good opportunity to play. I was very impressed with the South African group. Didn't know a lot about all of those players, so it was really nice to see. And I tell you what, they've got some exciting players coming through, so that was impressive. And no real surprises from Australia. I actually thought they played it the most boring way, but it worked. It was typical, just we were taking 1 points, but it was smart, because actually when New Zealand played, they actually shot themselves in the foot a few times with some of the shots, the choices that they tried to make. But all in all, I thought it was a really good competition to see. Great opportunity for some of our English youngsters, and like I say, a nice eye opener to see some of the other talent coming through.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree about Australia. They actually had the highest shooting percentage, but that's because they shot most of theirs from the 1 point zone. And I thought it was quite funny because they kept mentioning the super shot and they were not taking any at all, really. And so it was a bit surprising from that perspective. But in terms of the competition, it was really exciting. Like you say, and 11 of the 18 matches were actually decided by 6 points or less. So that means that right up until that final buzzer, you don't know who's going to win, and it could be anyone's game, which was really good. And there were a few kind of buzzer beaters that weren't, and it was really interesting. But when you're coaching Fast Fives, Tamsin, or being involved in it as a player, what are the main considerations in terms of how it differs from standard netball?
It's funny, actually, the first year we ever did it, I tried to get all tactical smart, and it just went out the window because Rach Dunn was just shooting her long bombs, and then she was I couldn't tell her when to shoot or when not to shoot because she just had the feeling. So I quickly discovered that there was very limited options you could give in that, especially from the shooting end, because the reality is you can tactically tell people to do things all day long, but if they're on, they're on. You can shoot those 6 pointers like 1 out of 10, but the one that you get nails the game and wins you it. So it's quite an interesting game tactically to have a look at. I think what I get most intrigued about, and actually what Australia were great at, is bringing the ball through the court. So they are really good on transition. New Zealand will let ball go a lot more as well, and I think that's where England were a bit cagey. So I think it starts to open up some of the vision and the talent you've got, and also starts to show the players that get involved in the game, because you can't go missing in that game, because it really, really highlights. So when you do get sticky and when no one's available, you're basically saying you can't get free on a one-on-one. So I think it highlights some individual technical skills that are sometimes missing in the game, especially when you're trying to play safe. So tactically, it's a great game for that. But I think you do have to take things with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because, well, Australia had a plan. They came in to do that. But on a day where someone's nailing 2 or 4 points, that game plan's not going to work either. What they banked on is that with a lot of the young, inexperienced shooting ends on some of those teams, they were nailed by that Australian smother and defence. And I think that's where they got the upper hand.
Yeah, definitely. And we did see a couple of shock results, didn't we? But that's just kind of the nature of Fast Fives, that it can be just one shot, from outside of the ring that really turns the whole game on its head. Obviously Uganda defeating Australia on day one, South Africa then defeating New Zealand. It was interesting kind of how the competition evolved. But focusing a bit more on England, from the England Roses perspective, I was really impressed by the effort overall from the team. I thought Ellie Ratu did a fantastic job when she came on. I think that perhaps we didn't see the best of Alicia Scholes in that centre position. We know she's more likely to play in that wing attack role. But I mean, Paige Reed was sensational, and I was maybe a doubter when she was named in the squad, but what incredible shooting from her. And obviously, they're coming up against these Australians who are playing in the SSN week in, week out. You had basically a New Zealand A squad, the likes of Dunn, Poi, Maturo. I think it's really great, that exposure that all of those youngsters got. Tamsin, if you had to name an England player of the competition, who would it be? Would it be Pekova?
Yeah, I think defensively for me, she was very impressive. And when we're talking about goalkeeper and options, it'll be great to see her get regular court time this season. It's not easy in that back position when there's so much space around you playing fast five, but she did a great job. She got on ball. And I think she was probably one of the players that we weren't going to talk about that much going into the competition. And yet she really stood up and delivered. So it was exciting to see her play.
Yeah, 100%. And just before we wrap up, then I just wanted to speak about, obviously, Fast Fives. It was fantastic. It was really exciting netball, exactly what we want to see. Should we introduce more Fast Fives into the calendar? An SSN Fast Fives, an ANZ Fast Fives. Obviously, there was no UK Fast Fives All Stars this year. Unfortunately, we didn't get any communication about why that was, perhaps a funding issue or something like that. And we hope it will be back in the future. But do you think there's any scope for that, Tamsin?
I think, and here you go, I'll be controversial again. I think Fast Five is the way forward for Olympics, purely because we can't have another competition where, like World Cup and like Commonwealth Games, where the games are such blowout games. And I can say that coaching Scotland, it's frustrating. We don't want to be losing by 30, 40 points to some of these nations either. But the nature of Fast Five allows teams to stay in the games a lot longer, that tournament kind of format. And I think World Netball has got some serious catching up to do. If we want to be involved in major competitions like that, we need to also understand that the game in its full 60-minute entirety only works for about 4 nations at the moment, until lots of teams play catch up, and that's going to take some time. So I think there's definitely options to for the big stages for that tournament to be involved, and whether we look at a mixed format as well. Now we've got the men, and I think that's been incredible the last couple of months with the coverage that we've been giving the men's sport. And I think there's options to definitely do more stuff across the world, like you're saying, whether it's a nations thing or whether it is like a club thing. Like, imagine having like a super club Fast Five competition where you can fly people in for a weekend and do it. I know England have attempted to do that and it's been good, but imagine if we could get all nations on board on that as well. So you get some more players in, and whether it becomes like a bit of a rugby sevens thing where it travels around the world. I think there's more scope for it. I think you can get a crowd in. I think you can get TV coverage on that. I think the nature of the game sets itself up nicely to be far more competitive than perhaps what we have on an international stage at the moment. And I think that would help whilst we're growing the game elements.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And like, when you think of it from a like an entertainment product perspective, like you have all the music, you got all the fancy dress costumes, you got all that kind of stuff. Like, it is just an entirely different product. And I think the more variety and variation that we can have within netball and diversifying how it's experienced, I think, that the more the better for me personally. And you've just reminded me, Tamsin, thank you very much, that we've almost gone like an hour and a half, and I can't believe I haven't even mentioned the England Thorns. I mean, that in itself is like a whole nother episode and live pod. But just a quick one to say, like, we are so unbelievably proud of all of them, and how they've performed and really creating history. And big shout out to Ryan Allen, the president of EMNA, who I believe has now played his last test for the Thorns, first and last test. So yeah, what an occasion for him, and all of the work that's gone on behind the scenes. Like, you guys are absolute superheroes, and onwards and upwards for men's and mixed netball for sure. For anyone who hasn't seen yet, we've tweeted the England Roses Netball World Cup squad graphic. So do save the copy, head over to Instagram, pop it on your story, and tag us at Qtr Time Pod, and we can share it. It'd be really good to see how much variation there is between the fans as well. And we can share mine and Lucy's starting sevens on there as well. So that's kind of all we've got time for now, really, guys. Next up, in terms of international netball, we believe is going to be Quad Series, likely in January. And then, of course, our Netball Super League kicks off again in February. If you haven't seen it, we have done a sign-in window episode where we interviewed 3 head coaches for the Super League franchises: Asher Francis from Bath, Camilla from Mavericks, and Mickey from Storm. So do catch up on that if you haven't already. A big thank you to everyone for tuning in today, and a huge thank you for your insight and your expertise from our lovely guest, and for giving up your time to chat with us. Thank you so much, Tamsin. I can't tell you how much the netball family appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. You know I love a good netball chat.
Oh, well, we're going to get you back on then. You said it now. We'll get you back on for another live pod at some point soon. Yeah, big thank you, everyone, and take care. See you all soon.
Bye, guys.